what goes through your mind, especially thinking that you're going to be walking some of those same buildings where you were working, and now you're launching your medical career there?
I get a bit emotional. It's definitely chills that go through my body. I actually did a wave rotation there in October, and I did walk those same halls. I was still a medical student, but it felt surreal. And I told my husband at the time that I almost cried when I walked in the doors because I literally had a mop and bucket originally, and now I have a white coat. I wanted to be surrounded by other doctors that look like me because I don't see that often where I'm from. So I was just like, I definitely have to go to Howard. I have to be around people who are like me and who can understand my journey.
Every few weeks, I get the same message. Sometimes it's from a teacher, sometimes a nurse, a paralegal, or a stay-at-home parent whose youngest has just started school. And it almost always starts the same way. I think I want to be a doctor, but I'm 34, I've got kids, and I'm wondering if it's just too late for me. I'm Dr. Karen Francois, and I'm a board-certified anesthesiologist with 15 years in practice. I've been married to a high school teacher for 23 years now, and together we're raising 3 kids. So today I want to answer that question the way I wish someone had answered it for me, not with a pep talk, but with real numbers. Let me take the age question off the table first, because it's the one that stops most people before they even begin. There is no age limit on medical school. The average student starting out is around 24, but every single class has people in their 30s, their 40s, and even their 50s. The path does get harder the later you start it, and I won't pretend otherwise, but it is not closed to you. And honestly, schools have come to value the very thing you're afraid is a liability, because a career changer who has run a classroom, managed a team, or raised children brings a kind of judgment that a 22-year-old simply hasn't lived long enough to have. So, am I too old? Turns out to be the wrong question entirely. The right question is the one with numbers attached to it. How long is this really going to take? And what is it going to cost the people you love? Let me walk you through the timeline honestly. If you didn't major in science, you're going to need prerequisite coursework before you can even apply. And for most career changers, that's 1 to 2 years of biology, chemistry, physics, and the entrance exam. Then medical school itself runs 4 years. And then comes residency, which is the part people always seem to forget, because the day you graduate, you're technically a doctor, but you still can't practice independently yet. And residency runs anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on the specialty you choose. So when you add all of that up, from your very first prerequisite to the day you're a fully independent attending physician, you're looking at somewhere between 8 and 13 years. If you start at 35, that means you'll finish somewhere in your mid-40s. I want you to sit with that number for a moment rather than flinch away from it, because here's what my own mentor once told me. Those years are going to pass anyway. You're going to be in your mid-40s either way, and the only real question is whether you arrive there as a physician or as someone who always wondered what might have happened. Now I want to talk about the part that no spreadsheet will ever show you, which is what this costs at home. And I'll speak from my own house here. I've got 3 children, a teenager who's convinced I don't notice anything, another one a couple of years behind who's learning from how I handle pressure, whether I mean to teach it or not, and my youngest, who is 7 and who is autistic and who doesn't speak with words. So when people ask me how a parent actually survives the training years, I don't answer them in theory, because what made it possible for me wasn't grit, it was infrastructure. It was a partner who carried more than half of everything during the very hardest stretches. My husband has taught high school for over 2 decades, and his steadiness at home is the only reason any of this ever worked. So if you've got a family, I want you to hear me clearly. The most important conversation you'll have isn't with an admissions officer, it's with the adult you share a home with, because you genuinely cannot do this alone. And anyone who tells you that you can is selling you something. So here's the heart of all of it. Am I too old was never the real question. The real question is whether your family is truly in this with you. Because if the support is really there and you still want it with clear and open eyes, then your age and your children are not the obstacles you've been told they are. In fact, they may turn out to be your greatest assets. But I promised you numbers, and I've saved the hardest ones for what comes next. So let me show you, dollar by dollar, exactly what every year of this costs and what it eventually pays. I'm going to line up a janitor, a bartender, a teacher, a nurse, a lawyer, and an anesthesiologist side by side and show you exactly where the money crosses. And trust me, you are not going to want to miss the year it finally flips. So let's talk about the cost of going in. As I'm recording this, the average medical student graduates with around $223,000 in education debt, and that's just the average. 4 years of attendance, when you fold in tuition, fees, and the cost of actually living, runs roughly $300,000 at a public school and well over $400,000 at a private one. And there's one timing detail you really have to check for yourself because the federal student loan rules tightened in the summer of 2026, bringing in new lifetime borrowing caps. So please verify today's number with a financial aid office before you commit to anything. But here's the thing that almost nobody tells you. The debt isn't actually the biggest cost. The biggest cost is the income you don't earn during all of those years of training. So hold on to that thought for a second, because to understand why it's still worth it, you first have to see what it eventually pays. So let me build you a ladder. These are all averages as I'm recording this, and they vary pretty widely, but the shape of it is really the point. We'll start with a bartender who earns around $34,000, though of course tips can swing that quite a bit. Then a janitor at around $41,000. Then a high school teacher who earns around $66,000 on average, though here in New York, with enough experience, that climbs a good deal higher. Then a registered nurse at around $93,000. Then a lawyer at around $151,000, although lawyer pay is really split, with a lot of folks in public service landing closer to $60,000 or $120,000, and a smaller group in the big firms earning north of $200,000. Then a nurse anesthetist, the CRNA, earning well over $200,000. Then a family medicine physician, somewhere around $250,000 to $300,000. And finally, at the very top of the ladder, my own field, an anesthesiologist, with a median somewhere around $535,000, and plenty of us earning quite a bit more than that. Now I want you to look at this whole ladder again because there's something genuinely hopeful in it. There are people who started right down on that very bottom rung, and I'm thinking of someone who mopped hospital floors as a janitor to pay their own way and then walked across the stage years later as a medical school graduate. That's the same person climbing from the bottom rung all the way to the top within a single lifetime. And that story honestly deserves a video of its own, which is something I fully intend to make. The complete math of going from a janitor's wage to a physician's, every single dollar of what it cost and what it took. But for today, let it just stand as proof of the one thing this ladder is really trying to show you, which is that the rung you start on is never the rung you're stuck on. But this ladder hides something too, and I won't let it fool you because it only shows you where you end up. It doesn't show you the years spent in the red getting there. For roughly that first decade, the career changer is behind, carrying debt instead of savings and lost income instead of a paycheck, while someone who simply kept their old job is sitting ahead of you that entire time. The math doesn't actually flip in your favor until somewhere around a decade in, and after that the gap can widen enormously, but you've got to survive that decade first, and that is exactly why the family conversation matters more than any single number on this screen. So here's the takeaway I want to leave you with. Medicine really does sit at the top of that ladder, and the climb up to it is real, but it's also a full decade in the red before it ever starts to pay. And it's not a climb you make alone. So run the cost, the debt, the lost income, and the load on the people you love, all of it, honestly, before you ever fall in love with the white coat. Because if the math doesn't work, that isn't failure, that's wisdom. But if it does work, and your family is truly in it with you, then your age and your children are not the obstacles you were always told they'd be. I did this with 3 kids and a husband who carried me, and it was the hardest thing I have ever done, and I would do it all over again. I'm Dr. Karen Francois. If you'd like that janitor to doctor breakdown or the full specialty by specialty paid deep dive, tell me in the comments and subscribe so that the next one finds you. See you in the next case.